Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, Sarah. How are
It
you
is.
doing?
How am I doing? Oh, I'm doing well. It's February.
It's sunny.
Yeah. I mean, it's sunny, it's not raining, and we're headed towards in the right direction of spring.
We
So
are. We're more than halfway there.
the days are getting longer and there's more sun. So,
I know this morning I actually could see the sky getting light and blue instead of dim and gray. It was nice. It was nice.
yeah. Yeah, and I could hear the birds chirping this morning. I was like, this is nice. You gotta
I
take
saw
off.
a hawk. I saw two hawks in 2 days.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, just walking around where I live. Um, yeah, nice.
I had a little dog. I have a little dog, but when he was a puppy, I used to have to be careful. I could feel them ominously coming up behind.
Yeah, let's have a dog. Let's have a dog snack.
Cute little morsel. So here we are. We're just after, this is not common, but we're going to talk about the full moon after the fact because it was just so interesting and dramatic, and the effects of the full moon or the illustrations of the full moon are everywhere. So,
It was kind of horrifying to have an earthquake of such magnitude in Syria and Turkey. Um, I think I think that the full moon was at the degrees that were very prominent in terms of the rock and the hard place period, those 2 years,
yeah.
21 and 22. And everybody was couldn't wait for the rock and the hard place to let go. And so it let go, right?
Oh, okay.
And I guess it's good not to be where the earthquake was, but I think we're all getting the fact that we're all where the earthquake was. It's going to affect us all. How is it that, they can't get aid to people because of a friggin' war that never ends? Like what is that? Humans are
Mhm.
nuts. So, it's absurd. It's almost like existential absurd. Well, it is existential absurdity, like the way the theater of the absurd, um, to witness that part. But yeah, I think that the full moon, which was on the 5th, I don't know, was the earthquake on the 6th or something? I mean, it was very.
Yeah, it was it was very close. I can't remember the exact day, but it was
So the thing about the full moon is it was square Uranus. And the thing about the square to Uranus is a couple of things. One is that Uranus is the planet that Uranus and Pluto have a lot to do with Earth changes, like shaking of the Earth and kind of thing. And Uranus isn't leaving Taurus for a while. So we're going to have more things happening with Uranus throughout the year and into next year. And without going there in this conversation, Pluto's going to go into Aquarius, which is a fixed sign like Taurus, and
yeah.
there's going to be a little bang up there in this year also. Um,
Like when when Pluto moves into Aquarius.
yeah, at the end of May, there's another fixed T cross, right? So the full moon was a fixed T cross, but I have to say, it was a thing unto itself. It was in the middle, it was right on the midpoint between solstice and equinox, right? Which is in bulk or whatever you want to call it. But it's that middle point, those middle points between solstices and equinoxes are power points. They're real, intense, and they have been recognized in this way forever, that these are like the posts in the whole of the reality is
Hmm.
the middle of Aquarius, the middle of Scorpio, the middle of Taurus, and the middle of Leo, right? These are the four power points of the year. So Uranus is is conjunct one of those power points, and the full moon was conjunct two others of those power points, and so it was this cross
Right.
uh, right at that 16 degrees, 15 degrees. It was pretty awesome,
Right.
pretty right on. So that's not, we won't necessarily have that kind of intense interaction, but Jupiter, way later in the year, will make a station at 15 degrees of Taurus. So one of those midpoints. Jupiter's going to sit there for a month. Um, I don't know if there's a lot of aggravation towards that. I think somewhat with Venus retrograde. So there's there's a call to be aware of the fixed points, and the when fixed points give way, they do it explosively. Right? They hold on, they hold on, they hold on, and then they boom.
And
So
yes,
that earthquake was, it couldn't have been a more dramatic Uranus square Leo and Aquarius expression. Honestly, it was astrodrama.
right. Yeah, well, I like the way you describe that in terms of the fixed points, because in astrology there's the energies of fixed, mutable, and
Cardinal.
um, cardinal. And the fixed energy is exactly that. And if you've had a Taurus or a Leo or an Aquarius friend, you would know what fixed means, or Scorpio, right? In that they very much hold the line. They hold the, I won't say power, but they can accumulate power in their fixity. They
Yes,
can.
and when the power is us and them, it's impossible. It's only fixed people always need to learn to allow, to engage, to surrender to the power, and then it will carry them in a very favorable way.
Mhm,
But if it's about capitulation, right? If it's about overpowering, which our culture is all about overpowering. If it's about overpowering, then the fixed energies get really toxic.
mhm. And yeah, we probably have a whole bunch of toxicity right now in the world. But so when you've got a planet like Uranus that is explosive and full of surprises, and with the intention of evolving and moving forward and bringing
Waking
revelation,
up,
wake
waking
up.
up.
That's what you get.
That's what you get.
You get
That's,
explosions. And we didn't have an earthquake here in Toronto, but we were all shook a little with the news that came out on Friday evening about our mayor.
yeah, to be honest, I think the more horrifying things that have been happening in Toronto were the murders on the Danforth. Um,
Yeah.
as far as local goes, it's just very, it's horrifying, and it's very explosive and all that. But yes, John Tory is resigning, and I don't think that's horrifying. I think it's more like Gemini. It's more like Mars and Gemini gossip news, like it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Right.
And I think I don't know, no insult to John Tory, or maybe insult to John Tory, I don't know. I think he's behaving like a schoolboy who had his knuckles wrapped, and he is doing the right thing. He knows what the right thing. He knew what the right thing was all along, and now he's going to do it like a good guy, because I don't know, he went to boarding school and that's what they taught him.
Well, I have to say it was a little refreshing, because you mentioned he's a Gemini, like Trump is a Gemini, like Rob Ford was a Gemini.
I know.
And
But lots of men have affairs. Bill Clinton was a Leo.
okay. But no, but it was the audacity that when a scandal came up, they just doubled down and were just like so unrepentant, like there was no,
Absolutely. This is what guys do.
you
This is what
know,
happens.
and so it was a little refreshing for him to be like, yeah, okay, I fucked up. I fucked up. you
I
know?
actually think his wife must have said to him, look, John, this is going to be too embarrassing. They've been married, I read, since 1978.
Yeah.
And he has a really nice Saturn Venus trine in his chart.
Yeah.
And Saturn is going to go into Pisces, and it's going to trine Venus and trine Saturn. He's going to be fine. He did the right thing. He's doing the right thing. I don't want to mock it, but it felt so schoolboy correct. I couldn't help notice. I think what I think Mars retrograde has exposed, the Gemini, whatever it was, but something prompted him to be nervous. enough. I don't think he wanted to resign. I think he had to resign because the idea of the scandal would have been really hard on his family.
Right. Yeah.
And I think Venus in Cancer, trine Saturn in Scorpio, I think he does love his family. Like if his wife came to me for a reading, I would say, it wasn't about you.
Right.
It was about the stress of, but what's really interesting, the first thing I saw was that he has Mercury at 26 degrees of Gemini, and Neptune is squaring it. So he's confused.
Mm,
He acted in confusion. I don't know if this chart has a time. Let me just see if there's a time here. Time unknown. So we don't know. We know he has a moon in Aries. We don't know exactly what degree it is. We don't know his ascendant. Um, and we see that he has Mars in Capricorn. He's a pretty power. He wanted to be mayor. He wasn't. He should have. He wanted. His Mars is strong and uh, to be the one who directs and manages. But possibly his Mars squares the moon, most likely, and the stress and the pressure. I don't like to take him off the hook for having an affair with a woman who was, the whole thing is ridiculous. It's always like Merlin and Nemu, right? That the woman is young and beautiful, and just she's beautiful because she's young, and she kind of wraps the wizard in a delusion, and that's it. It's the end of his magic,
right.
right? It's Merlin stuck in the tree forever, right? And I don't know why they fell into it. I don't know what he must have been drunk at the time. So um, I think that Neptune square Mercury is kind of like, I'm sure he's going, I don't know why I did that. What was I thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't thinking. But he made the right choice to leave now,
Right.
because after Mars squares his Mercury and Neptune gets going, it would be much harder. At least now he can deal with the confusion and the remorse in private.
Right.
I hope for him. I mean, I have nothing,
Right.
I have no personal bad feelings about John Tory.
Right. I
I'm
mean,
sure it
he's
was the stress and the Mars moon square, like that he just needed to release the
the
tension.
tension.
And what better way to release tension, really?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say for a Toronto, it was a bit shocking. Like when I read it, there was a little Uranus edge to it. For reading the story, it's like, oh, I just really totally did not see that coming because he just got elected, and it seemed like things were going this way. And in Uranus
Only Rob
passion,
Ford would do the same.
what's that?
Yeah.
And things are going that way.
If only Rob Ford would do the same.
Doug?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that would be a nice surprise. Anyway,
I don't know. I suppose we could also look at actually we should look at the chart of Toronto, for those of us who are interested in Toronto, which might not be everyone who's
no,
watching this.
right.
But so the chart for Toronto is the amalgamation chart, right? And the amalgamation chart of Toronto, if you may recall, has a tremendous amount of Aquarius in it, I believe. Yeah. So Venus, Uranus, Mars, Moon, and Jupiter all in Aquarius.
Oh my goodness.
We're meant to be a beacon for the age of Aquarius, and I don't think we are, at least at the moment, except in the fact that people come here from all over. But when Pluto goes into Aquarius, it's gonna trigger everything, all these, and right now, so the one of the planets that Toronto doesn't have in Aquarius is Neptune, but Neptune is at 28 degrees of Capricorn, and Pluto is at 28 degrees of Capricorn. So this is all to say that Toronto is going to have Pluto transits for years,
Oh
years,
my gosh.
and it's either going to
Gee.
be the end or the transformation of Toronto.
Wow. Well, that's very interesting.
I would say it's very interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay. I wonder what that will hold.
And I lived in New York right before they cleaned it up.
Right.
New York was full of murders and violence and drugs and homeless people. I mean, the numbers now aren't impressive, but there was like an entire city in the subway underground in New York, which, was mind blowing. Um, but then when Giuliani came in and cleaned it up, he didn't clean it up so much as he gentrified it,
Right.
right? He made it so that he cleaned it up, he worked on cleaning it up, but he did it so that, big box stores could come and have, like, suddenly there was a Gap every few blocks on New York, that kind of thing. I
Right.
left before that happened, but I remember going back and thinking, oh, this isn't what this isn't the city. Um, so of course people have adapted and they still think of New York as the city. I mean, everyone thinks of New York as a city if they live there. So um, um, I think we have to be careful of that. I don't think that was a good choice.
Right.
But I mean, that's just me. But I think a lot of people don't think that was such a good choice.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Well, it'll be
And
interesting.
Pluto won't put up with that choice. Pluto is not a gentrifying planet.
It certainly is not. Uh, how would you describe Pluto, Julie?
Well, Pluto is like, gentrify this,
Right.
right?
Right.
You can't build something on top of a sewage plant and think it's not going to stink.
Right.
So Pluto is asking us in a very, I mean, I don't like to be Pollyanna, but it's asking Toronto, let's say, over many years to come, to really look at the underlying roots. Don't just keep throwing money at the police, really look at the underlying issues and deal with them because they're not going to go away.
Hmm.
Farming it out to the suburbs is not going to help.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's not New York in the 1980s. It's really a world where the displacement of people is you can't keep them out. And the we are one is a lovely idea, but we're one with all living things. And partly that's why we're having so many viruses, because we're getting too close to the wild world, right? Like there's all sorts of pros and cons to having it all. We are all one, but we are all one.
Right.
We can't just keep throwing cement on top of the things that need to be. I mean, that's Pluto. You asked me about Pluto, that's Pluto.
Yeah.
Pluto says, do not just keep paving over.
Right. We're not doing a facelift here. It's not surface. It's not putting a facade up or changing the facade. It is
That's right.
deep and it is thorough
Yeah.
in its transformation.
Right. So John Tory stepping down at this moment when Pluto is conjuncting the Neptune is all about who takes his place.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Is it going to be someone who can do Pluto in Aquarius or not?
Right. Yeah, which makes it a little bit more interesting now to know that this big, you know, transit of Pluto going over so many of its planets in Aquarius is going to mean that deep, deep, deep transformation. And what will Toronto look like?
Yeah, right. And
Hmm.
and we're glimpsing it now. And Pluto's going to slip into Aquarius, and then it's going to slip back into Capricorn. It's going to conjunct Neptune again for Toronto. So this is the beginning. This is the setup of it. I wish they would talk to me.
I wish they would too, actually. Maybe we could send this to them.
I wish there was an office of the astrologer for the city. I would be the first. I would love it.
Oh, then we'd be like
Myself.
Norway, when they have you have to ask the little people before you build.
Oh,
And
in
then,
Iceland, yeah.
in
Is it?
Iceland,
No,
yeah.
yeah, Iceland, yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
well,
really.
I was starting to feel stressed about all the construction they're going to be doing at Pape and Danforth because that's where my office is, and
Yeah,
like I can start to feel the rumblings around
yeah.
of the metro links and all of the stuff that they're going
Yeah.
to be doing, and yeah, like there's a little bit of unease knowing that, but now that I know this piece of information, it's a lot more interesting.
Yeah, and there's no way we cannot build to house people. It's just how we do it and who gets the benefit of it. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, even just up where I am, they're putting in a whole bunch of condominiums, and there was a sign on one of them that said, "Housing in this district doesn't necessarily mean placement at schools."
Oh.
Yeah.
So just because you live in at Pape and Danforth, you can't send your kid to the local school?
No, this is in the neighborhood that I live in.
Oh, I see. That's a different neighborhood.
Yeah, so they have a whole bunch of condos being built, and so what that says to me is that they're not really paying attention to infrastructure, and
Oh,
yeah,
who decides that?
I don't know.
So that means we don't want immigrant children in our schools?
Maybe.
Oh my God.
Or we don't want children. How about that? We don't want, if you're going to move in, don't have kids.
Wow, there's a lot of ways to see that. That's terrible. Well, yeah, these are the things that are going to have to be worked
Yeah,
out. Yes, and where you live, I can understand that. I can understand that there would be people trying a, a NIMBY, not in my backyard-ish. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, so
Today it'll be kindergartners, tomorrow it'll be gang.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so okay, that's a real thank you for having that look at Toronto. I think we could,
we
yeah,
will. We'll come
that,
back to it again and
that
again
would
and
be helpful
again.
moving forward for
Yeah.
sure. And then of course we will be discussing Pluto moving into Aquarius, kind of maybe in the next few sessions, because that's going to be huge for the whole world, not just for Toronto. But before that, we can maybe get our heads around Saturn moving into Pisces, because Saturn has been creating this rock and a hard place for the last 2 years.
Indeed.
Um,
Yeah, so Saturn's done with that. Saturn says, okay, I'll be done March 7th. I don't want to hear about it anymore. I don't want to, it's not my problem. I didn't do it. Don't blame me. Um, uh,
well, it was like literally when when Saturn ingressed into Saturn was the lockdown. Literally, that
yeah.
was like there we go. Saturn in Aquarius was lockdown.
Saturn and Jupiter really came together as 0 degrees of Aquarius. Forget the song, forget the words to the song. This is Aquarius too.
Right.
I
Yes,
know. Laugh, laugh.
exactly. The
Yeah.
dawning of the age of Aquarius is so different than they thought it was in that musical Hair. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not long hair and hippies for sure.
Not enough of them. No, all the long-haired hippies are, you know, clogging up the healthcare system. There's a new moon on February 20th,
Okay.
and it's at 1 degree of Pisces. And then on March 7th, Saturn will go into Pisces. And so the new moon is like a harbinger of Saturn. But it's different. And the moon and Saturn have a very strong relationship anyway. So it's nice, or I don't know if it's nice, but it's symbolically interesting to see this connection. And I think for me, when I've been contemplating, because of my new moon things, I've been contemplating, okay, so what is this new moon in Pisces uh, conjuring for me? It's this feeling of the irreconcilableness of the suffering that's going on the planet and my own personal reality. There's some kind of irreconcilable aspect between living a life that's orderly and stable and the food prices are awful, but I can still afford to eat and all that stuff. Knowing, and it's not just knowing over there that there is an earthquake, but knowing that there are people in my city who can't eat, who don't have enough money to eat or have shelter, and it's growing and growing and growing. And you know, I don't know what I can do. Like I do little things that I think are helpful, but you know, not even a drop in the bucket. So I'm sitting with, and I think we all need to sit with a bit, especially at the new moon, with that feeling of the irreconcilable. Is that the word? It's irreconcilable what's going on. It just doesn't add up,
Yeah.
right? And so let it not add up. instead of sticking our fingers in the, holes trying to keep the water from coming, why don't we just allow for the fact that the water is rising or whatever your metaphor is. And then Saturn goes into Pisces, same sign, right? Same sign of this great wash of stuff. And it's going to say, okay, we have to deal with it, even if it's not reconcilable, we have to deal with it. And we
Right.
can't deal with it by just feeling guilty, right? The worst thing about Saturn and Pisces for people, let's say, who are born with Saturn and Pisces, who are either on the verge of becoming adults or becoming old people, or just getting born, I suppose, later in this year, is they often carry a feeling of guilt for something they didn't do. They don't even know what it is,
Mm,
right?
mm.
And so that's going to be the least functional way to deal with Saturn and Pisces, is just to, walk around with your hair shirt. But the work that we have to do, not to just feel guilty, because guilt is a kind of, when you feel really guilty, it kind of takes you out of the loop, right? It's not your problem. You're just suffering from guilt. So I don't think there's a lot of people who have a lot of reason to feel guilty. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Saying that, people like you who do the kind of work that you do really need, with Saturn and Pisces, will really need to cut to the core where people are holding on to guilt as a protection against something bigger.
Right. As a defense against actually feeling the the deeper feeling, and then allowing that to move you into some sort of action or some sort of connected,
Exactly.
um, yeah, connection with it. Yeah.
So you might have more to say about that. I can tell you that that's what's required, but you actually have more to say about the application of that in terms of your practice. And so it might be very interesting for you to pay attention in your work between the new moon on February 20th and the Saturn ingress on March 7th and beyond.
Okay. Like in terms of people suffering, in terms of how
In terms
people
of
are,
what people are, I mean, people come to you with their very personal suffering,
yeah.
but I don't think there's going to be much ability to separate out our personal sufferings from the collective once Saturn gets into Pisces. I think to deal with our personal sufferings, we're going to have to see it as connected to a world. So in the Jung podcast that we're listening to, they talk about the spirit of the times and the spirit of the depths,
Yes.
right? And I think Saturn in Pisces is really asking us all to connect the spirit of the times that we're living in to the spirit of the depths, which feels very personal when you're thinking about your childhood and the traumas and abuses of your life, but it takes us into the underground river that connects us all.
That's right. Yes. That's very well said. Yeah. Yeah. That's deep, Julie.
Well, it's a deep concept, but you're doing the actual excavating. Like, I can give the words to it. I have Mercury and Gemini, whatever, but
Mm.
you're doing the actual journeying into the realm with people. I do it too, to some extent, when I do a reading for people, for sure. But I'm always it's interesting how that's why astrology isn't enough in terms of living your life, right? Because I'm like the messenger as an astrologer. I'm the fairy person. I can take you into the realm where you need to do the work, but you can't do the work just by talking about it.
Right. Or you're the way I've experienced it is you've given me a like a framework bef- from another realm. So when I'm in the trenches or in
Yes.
the muck
Mhm.
and the confusion of like then I can hear your voice going blah blah blah, and it's like a light. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, this is how I'm gonna hold this, and this is how I'm gonna view this to move through this.
And that works for me too. When I have my own pieces of caca that I have to deal with, I remember that Saturn's opposing my Mars, and it helps me.
It really, really does.
It
Yeah,
really does.
yeah,
I couldn't imagine why I was listening to I just took a left and started listening to a book called Achilles, about Achilles.
yeah.
And why am I listening to a book about Achilles? Like, who gives a shit? He was a killer, right? unbelievable portrait of a warrior and the warrior, the archetypal warrior, Achilles. And I realized it was my Mars. Of course, I wanted to listen to a book about Achilles. Perfect sense.
Right. Yeah. And then within that are insights. Yeah.
Total insights about my own Mars.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many tools and resources like astrology um, to help people through, that have been here for forever, that help people to navigate the craziness that it is to be a human and trying to be a conscious human and trying to be a loving human, and not just fall into instinct and fall into unconsciousness. And yeah, and also that podcast on Jung, and Jung himself, despite all of his humanness, laid a pretty impressive map for us to learn how to move through it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Saturn and Pisces, there we have it.
So the nice thing about Saturn and Pisces going on, I think I'm right about this, is that in the first year of Saturn, so it'll be 2.5 years, it's not making any really terrible aspects to other planets. There's probably moments when Mars will square it and stuff like that, but nothing dramatic, no terrible stations or whatever. And the only real aspect that it is making is a sextile to Jupiter when it goes into Taurus.
Oh.
And that is kind of a hopeful thing in terms of on the ground, maybe local solutions to the problem of constant overflow of suffering and sewage and insanity and, people who don't fit in. I mean, there's really a question with Pisces always about what we do with the people who don't conform, right? That's why Pisces is about mental hospitals and prisons and regular hospitals and all, places where we put people, nursing homes, all those things that we don't want to kind of deal with. But as we become more and more aware of the fact that we are, that everybody belongs on the planet because they were all earthlings or something. I like that Jupiter sextile to Saturn. It's not really there until later in the year, but once Jupiter goes into Taurus, in mid-May, there's that, comfort between the two of them, maybe.
Interesting. How do Jupiter and Saturn usually get along? What's their type of
They're a
relationship?
very powerful pair because you have all the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and Sun and Moon. And then you have all the transpersonal planets, or Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and beyond. And Jupiter and Saturn are between the personal and the transpersonal.
Mm.
So they represent our social fabric. They
Mm.
represent the choices we make in a civil or uncivilized society, right? So you could say it's law and order. Jupiter is ethics, Saturn is limits and structures, and Saturn definitely has to do with the systems we create and the hierarchies we um, support and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. They're like middle management.
Not middle management. Yeah, it's the bureaucrats. It live in the Jupiter Saturn realm, and bureaucrats have a bad rap, but we sort of need them to administrate.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's very helpful. I think moving into this next. I mean, I was thinking nothing could be as dramatic as 2020's astrology, but then 2021 came along, and that was dramatic as well. But it still continues the
The
challenges.
drama of 2020, there is nothing that can compete with it. It was over the top, but where it's like you don't have it in astrology. It's not like you have a transit and then it goes away and then that's it. You go back. You
Right.
never go back. You
Right.
have a transit and it changes something, and then you go forward with that change.
Right. Right.
So 2020, it didn't end and now we're all okay. I know that's what people wish, but 2020 delivered us to
It
2020.
literally transited us into a new, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, thanks, Julie, and look forward to our next
me
discussion.
too.
See what
Me
comes
too.
up.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.